Now, I want you to think about those two options when you think about what the Bible teaches about sin and salvation. The Calvinist reads his Bible and sees that human beings are now in a state of fallenness and rebellion against God. In the natural condition, now, we have our hearts set against God. Our wills are inclined against Him. It's not that we cannot choose God, that some external thing is preventing us from exercising our choice, but that we will not. That we are determined. I want to say bound and determined. You know how we use that term? He was bound and determined to do what he wanted to do. Now, when we use that term bound and determined, we use it figuratively, that there was no course of action that was left for him because his will was set in a particular way. He was going to choose that no matter what. And we are bound and determined in that sense. We are steadfastly and immovably in defiance of God. Read Romans 1 if you're uncertain, 1, 2, 3, if you're uncertain about that biblical fact. And that every time we exercise our free choice against God, we do so in a way that is consistent with our anger and hostility and rebellion against Him. In other words, when we exercise our freedom, we choose what we want to do as fallen human beings. We always choose against God. Our freedom, then, is the problem. It's not the solution. So, with all men bent against God, what is God's response? Their now natural inclination is rebellion. They are not inclined in any sense, and because of that, will not in any sense choose to follow God. Now what? God rescues us from our rebellion by sovereignly changing our nature and re-inclining our wills. In other words, He changes the direction of our hearts so that instead of choosing from a rebellious inclination, we choose from an inclination that seeks God and His forgiveness. And this act of God is an act of mercy and grace on our behalf that we did not deserve. Now, here's the kicker. He does not do that for every person. And why He doesn't, I don't know, but the difference between those He does it for and those He does not do it for is the difference between the elect and non-elect. Because if men were left to their own devices, they would all continue in their rebellion because that is now, since the fall, their nature. They would continue to freely choose in the first sense of freedom that we discussed, according to the inclination that is hostile towards God, and no one would be in heaven, and Christ would have no bride. Therefore, God chooses from among the rebellious who are under condemnation appropriately because of their choice to rebel and sin against God. So when God punishes them, it's not God's fault because He doesn't elect them. It's their fault because they chose rebellion and sin. So when God works in that fashion, He is rescuing them from themselves. God chooses the rebellious who are under condemnation and elects from those who are hopelessly lost a company of human beings who would be a bride for His Son. And He miraculously transforms their natures. He heals them so that now they choose the right option, forgiveness, instead of the wrong option, rebellion. Therefore, God is able to guarantee the result, a bride for His Son, an act of mercy towards those who don't deserve it. He does it in a way, He guarantees it in a way that allows men to freely choose restoration with God in the same way that they freely chose rebellion against God. They freely chose rebellion because it was consistent with their nature, and they acted consistent with their nature, and it was their choice, so it was free in that sense. And when God changed that nature by an act of grace, those who He chose responded consistent with that and freely choose Him now. And that is how an act of faith can be free and still be caused and fully secured by God.